All right, hello there everyone. Today we are going to tackle page 8 and page 9 of your interactive notebook. If you were absent on Monday or on Tuesday, this will help you. All right, so when we talk about slide 9, you actually have Pearl Harbor, Battle of Stalingrad, D-Day, and the Battle of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Right, these are some major events in World War II. If you look at it, it says after learning about some of the major battles of World War II, please answer the questions and paste the correct images in the areas marked with this little landscape. So, for example, Pearl Harbor, you were looking for, go ahead and preview it so that when you're looking at the lecture, you can just pause it and then plug it in. You're looking for the date. You're also looking for who attacked Pearl Harbor and why, and what was the result. Then you're going to find a picture of Pearl Harbor after the attack and paste it below. So the easiest way to do this for pasting these images in, so here you'll find an image of Pearl Harbor. Here you're going to find an image of the battle's effect on the city of Stalingrad. Here, this one goes along with D-Day, so showing a picture of D-Day, and this one will go along with the Battle of Iwo Jima or Okinawa. So you'll hit Insert Image, right? You can always search the web if you would like. All right, type in, for example, Pearl Harbor, and you'll find some images. So maybe click on this one and then hit Insert. Once it inserts, pare it down so that it will fit nicely on top of that part of your slide. Okay, and that way you have a little bit of a visual of what these battles were like and what the environment was like during those battles. All right, so when we first start, we begin actually with something that was not really a battle, guys. It was an attack, and for lack of I would say, actually, instead of using the word attack, I would say really ambush. This is when Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. FDR will call it a day which will live in infamy. Japan had moved troops into French Indochina and into other Pacific islands that were rich with oil and rubber, and the United States was pretty worried about them doing this, spreading their empire, taking over land, additionally kind of gobbling up resources that made it look like they were intending on going to war. And so the Americans are going to actually ban the sale of oil and other weapons materials to Japan in order to slow them down and to also slow down their military buildup in case they decided to come for us and our territories in Asia. This obviously angers them, right? Which is why they attack Pearl Harbor. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, around 8 a.m., about 300 miles north of Oahu in the island chain of Hawaii, right, they are going to actually take off with multiple aircraft and bomb Pearl Harbor. Torpedo our ships, bomb them. It actually comes in 2 waves. It lasts less than 2 hours, but the results are pretty devastating. We lose 2,400 soldiers, 200 American aircraft are destroyed, and 8 battleships are sunk or destroyed. All right, silver lining, we actually had several aircraft carriers that were not in port that morning. They were actually out in a training mission, and that actually proves to be helpful later. The American response is to abandon isolationism views and then actually declare war the very next day on Japan. 3 days later, Italy and Germany, who are Japan's allies, will declare war on us, right? So go back to your slide and fill in who bombed us, why did they bomb us, and what was the result, right? The result is massive casualties, loss of aircraft, loss of ships, right? But also us entering the war, right? So if we go on, we'll talk more about this one later. Okay. When we go on to the United States actually entering the war, the first place that we enter the war is Africa, which is interesting. Yes, we are fighting against Japan, but we have joined the Allies, and we're new to the Allies. So our allies are the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and France. And they looked at us like, listen, yes, you're our new ally, but we can't help you with Japan right now because we have our hands full, right, in Europe and in Africa with Hitler's forces. So the United States are going to, when we first invade, they are actually going to invade Morocco. Right? Morocco is in North Africa. We call this Operation Torch. My grandfather's actual battalion, this is Old Ironsides. They were the very first ones to see combat in World War II as they invaded North Africa in Operation Torch. They're going to push the Germans out of North Africa. The British and the French are going to also push them out of North Africa. They're going to corner them in the North African country of Tunisia, and then they will successfully beat Erwin Rommel's Nazi forces. All right, this is a pretty big deal because then Hitler doesn't have access to all of these resources and access to the Mediterranean Sea to the south. At that point, they are actually going to head up north and move into Italy and start to chip away at Italy. Italians are actually going to overthrow Mussolini, but Hitler is going to come in, put him back into power, and send his forces down there to reinforce Italy for about 18 months before the Allies are actually able to take over Italy. All right, so why do I tell you this? Well, if Hitler's busy in Italy, that means that he can't give 100% of his attention and support to his main invasion, and that is trying to invade the Soviet Union again. If you guys remember the first time he invades, right, the winter weather is a major issue for them and they have to fall back. So the second time he invades, he's actually going for the oil fields in southern Soviet Union in order to get oil for the war effort. The Soviets are going to hold them off, though, at the city of Stalingrad. And if you look at the name of the city, Stalingrad, you'll realize, right, that Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, the city is named after him. So there's no way he's going to let it fall. He doesn't let anybody evacuate. He sends men after man after man after man, and he is willing to lose every last Russian soldier in order to defend the city of Stalingrad. The Soviet soldier life expectancy on average was 1 day during this battle. This battle takes place in the city. It also takes place as winter sets in. Unfortunately for the Soviets, they lose 1 million Soviets in the defense of Stalingrad. On the plus side for them, they do win the battle, and this is a devastating defeat for Hitler. So if you were writing in your notes, right, why was this a turning point in the European front? It's the first time that you see Hitler lose a major offensive. He gets pushed back, and it's a devastating blow for him. At that point, the Soviets are actually going to push the Nazis and the Germans out of the Soviet Union altogether. You can see they're actually going to drive them further into Eastern Europe, and they're going to actually drive them even further all the way over within 40 miles of Berlin, and at that point, they are going to wait. Right, so what is it that they're waiting for? Well, they're waiting for the Allies to show up. Right, this famous photo, these are your Soviet soldiers, and then these are your American soldiers, and they are meeting in order to take over Berlin, which of course is the capital of Germany, and that is Hitler's last stronghold. All right, so how are these American soldiers going to end up meeting with the Soviets? Well, you need the American soldiers to land somewhere in Europe on the western side of Berlin, so over on this side of Berlin, in order to actually come in and surround Berlin. So the United States and Great Britain and French forces, and all of the British Commonwealth are going to plan the invasion of Western Europe by sea. This is called D-Day. The plan is devised by Dwight Eisenhower, later one of our presidents, and George Marshall. It develops specialized equipment. They actually train and try to mislead Hitler by dropping really cool things like inflatable tanks, right, to mislead them. They also are going to actually begin this entire invasion by dropping in paratroopers behind enemy lines, the U.S. 82nd and the U.S. 101st, as well as British paratroopers behind enemy lines. Again, remember, if the invasion by sea does not go well, nobody's coming in to rescue those guys. So they're being dropped in behind enemy lines, which is a pretty brave thing to do. On June 6, 1944, we are going to invade the beaches of Normandy. Probably your image that you went ahead and posted for D-Day looks like a beach because they landed on the beaches. When they land on the beaches, guys, they suffer really, really high casualty rates because of machine gun posts, landmines, barricades, right? The beach is heavily, heavily fortified. In the first day, we land 150,000 troops, but again, they have exceptionally high casualties. Against all odds, though, we are able to secure the beaches, so the result of D-Day is we secure the beaches. It is a huge victory for the Allies, and by July of 1944, there are 1 million Allies in France. The Americans, the British, and the French coming in from the north beaches of Normandy. You also have the Allies coming in from Italy after actually successfully breaking through German defenses there, and you also have French resistance fighters in the city of Paris just waiting for the Allies to show up. Everybody joins together, and the Nazis have no choice but to withdraw from France. All right. Today, there is a large American graveyard on the beaches of Normandy for all of the lives lost on that day. Because again, yes, it was successful, but devastating losses for the Allies. All right. So the war will end up ending in Europe because of the a sort of sandwiching of Berlin by the Allied forces, but Hitler does not just roll over and let them do this easily. He actually launches a last counterattack in Belgium called the Battle of the Bulge. And the Battle of the Bulge is meant to kind of create a bulge in the Allied lines and push back into France. However, the Allies crush the German offensive and they continue to march towards Berlin. Berlin ends up being surrounded. Hitler knows, right, that the inevitable has very sort of, become a reality and that he is going to lose the war. He commits suicide under the streets of Berlin, and on May 7th, 1945, you have VE Day, which is called Victory in Europe. Right, so that's great and well. However, the war is still continuing in the Pacific. Now we're going to shift our focus to fighting the Japanese. Right out of the gate, guys, the Japanese forces are better equipped. They're also pretty close to the United States. They've conquered strategic lands, and we have learned that they are fighting kind of a different type of war. Like, they don't have the same regard for prisoners of war as, say, we do or some of the European countries do. And the Bataan Death March is evidence of this, where they are going to force our prisoners of war, Americans that were taken as prisoners of war by them, and Filipinos that were taken as prisoners of war when they conquered the Philippines, and they're going to force them to march in what we call the Bataan Death March, where they march for days without food and water and medical care, and you end up with high numbers of people that die, not in battle, but simply because of the treatment that they receive from the Japanese. Right? Their Pacific battles, you end up with the importance of aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers basically set you up with little mobile islands that you can take off and land from, right? Japan is an island, so you have to invade, right, that island from somewhere. And if you guys remember, the fuel tanks on these planes, not exceptionally high, and so you need to be able to kind of hop across, right, the water in order to go and attack Japan. Well, we know that they are probably going to try to take out our naval bases so that we cannot hop to them. But fortunately for us, the Battle of Midway is a turning point in the Pacific. So if you look at slide 9, it will say Battle of Midway, significance to the war, right? Why was it a turning point in the Pacific? Well, the United States broke the Japanese code, and because of this, we were prepared for their attack. We destroyed 4 of their Japanese aircraft carriers, and this is a huge turning point for us. Okay, from this point on, Japan becomes a little more desperate. We are going to start to use a new strategy called island hopping, where we will actually skip over islands in the Pacific that the Japanese already had secured, and we're actually going to go for the weaker islands instead. Once we capture those weaker islands, though, we will set up blockades, right, cut off of supplies, okay, to Japan. And we are also going to use them as bases to launch air attacks. Again, the Japanese, are going to be heavily damaged by this strategy, and they start using kamikaze pilots towards the end of the war, where Japanese pilots are going to actually load their planes up with explosives and carry out suicide missions into ships. Americans are totally disturbed by this because our goal in war is to come home alive, right? The American goal, don't die. The Japanese goal is to win, and if you don't win, then you had better die, right? Either at the hand of your enemy or at your own hand. All right. This gives us the sense, again, that the Japanese fight a different type of war. They use, right, culturally, war is a little bit different for them. At this point, we start the final battles in the Pacific. Okay, we are regularly bombing, right, Japanese cities, which, again, human rights issues there for sure, because we are bombing them with napalm, which is devastating, and bombs are not specific, right? It's not like it's just bombing the military or bombing a factory. It's also bombing civilians, right? The Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa are 2 islands, right, that we are going to try to conquer in order to continue to be able to hop closer to Japan. Both battles are going to show that the Japanese were willing to fight to the death. Look at the numbers here. 7,000 American soldiers are lost in the Battle of Iwo Jima, but the Japanese lost 19,000. In the Battle of Okinawa, we lose 12,000 Americans. However, they lose more than 100,000 Japanese. At some point, when we lost 12,000, and let's say that their numbers were at like 20,000, right, there was no way they were going to win. They probably should have surrendered. But they don't. They continue fighting. 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 people, right? More than 100,000 Japanese soldiers have been lost, right? They probably, if it were us, we would have surrendered a long time ago, but they don't. And this teaches us that they are willing to fight to the absolute death. Defeat is something that they do not accept, right? And so because of this, we realize it could be a very, very, very long end of the war, and we could be fighting Japan until the very last Japanese person is standing. In which case we are left with a very difficult decision, right, on whether or not to invade Japan or to end the war using atomic bombs, right? And we will finish that, okay, in the next lecture. All right, guys, go back and finish up your slide 8, and then also please read the directions on the left-hand side of slide 9 and finish that up as well. All right, if you have questions, let me know, email me, or talk to me in class. Thanks.